Hey geeks. So, this is not a video I initially wanted to make, and you've probably heard that a lot this week if you've been on YouTube. I had no intention of making a video about Ed Piskor until I heard of his passing away, which was very sad. And I found it to be quite disturbing, honestly, so I wasn't really able to sit down immediately after the news of his passing and make a video. I thought it would be best to wait for a few days. When you watch a channel every day and you get to know somebody through that channel, that's what was kind of amazing about the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel that he was on, with Jim Rugg, who was his friend, I think, for at least 25 or more years. They're like brothers, along with Tom Sholey, who I think has known Ed for just about that period of time, or maybe about 15, 16, 17 years. Anyway, long enough to, I think, for all three of them to kind of consider each other brothers, consider each other family. And they created this channel, which was quite a wonderful thing. It was a grand promoter for the medium of comics, and I don't think its impact can be understated in the comics community. Not just to people that are in the community, but for anyone who is curious about comics, who comes across that channel. I think that channel would do a lot to get people into comics, to get them to love comics, to have a passion for it, the way the three individuals of that channel do. Now, Ed and Jim were the primary daily commentators. Tom would make periodic appearances. Tom also has his own YouTube channel, Total Recall Show, which is excellent. If you haven't checked it out, it's a little bit of a different format than Cartoonist Kayfabe, but it's a lot of fun. I like Total Recall Show a lot. But when I discovered Cartoonist Kayfabe, it was during the pandemic, during the lockdowns. And so we all spent a lot of time in front of our TVs and monitors during that period of time. And, since I've always been a fan of Jack Kirby since I was a child, I never had a copy of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And if you've seen my channel, you subscribe to it, you know that I did like a 3-part video on that comic when I finally obtained it. It's a masterpiece. So I just did a search on YouTube to see if anyone else was even talking about that movie adaptation and the subsequent comic series that Kirby did. And lo and behold, the Cartoonist Kayfabe episode on that comic is what came up. And so I watched it, and I was like amazed by it. I was like, who are these guys? Because I'd never heard of either one of them at the time. I was like, who are these guys they sound like me, aside from maybe the technical art knowledge they have. But, just in their passion and enthusiasm, and they're marveling, no pun intended, at the work of Kirby in this comic, and Kirby in general. I just knew instantly, I hit the subscribe, alert button right off the, I was like, I'd never seen any other comics channels like that in the past. Not that I was, following a lot of channels at that point. I don't think I was actually probably following any comics channels at that point. But to this day, I still don't know any other comics channels that get into the level of detail and convey that passion and love for comics the way Cartoonist Kayfabe did. My selfish hope is that the channel will continue with Jim Rugg and Tom Sholey, but I'm sure those two guys aren't even thinking about that right now. They just laid Ed to rest on Friday. Today is Saturday. Or no, they laid him to rest on Thursday. Yeah. So, but it's just such an amazing channel. And if anything, that will be part of Ed's legacy, will be the 1,500 plus episodes that they did. They created episodes to come out daily. If you know something about their process, what they would do is they would sit down and do about 5 to 6 hours straight of episodes, which would go anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half per episode, depending on how deep of a dive they were doing on particular comic books. And then they would just queue that up, load it up, into YouTube, and then start releasing those on a daily basis. And they were doing live streams. Near the end, Ed was doing live streams of his line and inking work on his latest comic strip, which is always fun to see professionals working and showing, their craft. And that's what Ed loved to do. Ed loved to show the craft and talk about the craft, and really talk about, what kind of tools did the cartoonists use. It was amazing to me to see two guys younger than me talking about comics that I collected as a kid. And I don't know, I guess it felt like a validation that I was on the right track, that I was, that I was correct in loving the same creators that they love. People like Kirby, of course, but Ditko and Bernie Wrightson and Walt Simonson, Larry Hama, Michael Golden. These are just off the top of my head. There's so many more. Dean Motter, Matt Wagner, Mike Mignola. The list goes on. And they had such a passion and reverence for these creators and the best work that these guys did, and but weren't afraid to call out BS when they found it. And sometimes when you look at comics, you're like, yeah, what the hell is this? Especially modern comics, which recently, and I have quoted them quite a bit. I mean, I think my 2 videos ago it was specifically about Jim Rugg talking about the coloring in modern comics. So they weren't afraid to go into those waters, and that may have rubbed a few people the wrong way. One of the other things that I loved about the channel is that they turned me on to new comics that I hadn't heard of. Even comics from the 70s and 80s, Silver and Bronze Age stuff. And then a few modern comics too. That that channel got me back into collecting comics. It reignited my passion and love for comics. As an older adult now, I'm able to take a different look at the medium, and as someone now who's working more hours as an artist than I ever have in the past. Their message resonates with me because it transcends just comics. Their message was one of, especially with Ed. Ed talked a lot about the grind, working every day. There's a book out there by Stephen Pressler called The War of Art that had a huge impact on me about 10 years ago. And then sadly, the gist of the book was, make art every day, even if it's crap. And then sadly, life begins to consume you with its inanities and distractions, and you stop creating, or you don't create as often as you were. But every once in a while, you need a wake-up call, and Cartoonist Kayfabe was that wake-up call to me. So ultimately, watching that channel is what got me back into taking my art more seriously, along with some other factors. And it was a revelation to watch that show. The fact that they put out episodes every day was like your daily reminder, you know, that you needed to do something. You needed to put in 30 minutes or an hour or 5 hours, whatever you could fit into, to make and to be a maker. And it prompted me into getting back into seriously thinking about writing for comics, because I've had a series of stories in my head since I was a child. And this situation made me realize that all of those seemingly disparate stories actually take place in the same universe inside my head. So, you know, at my age, in the times that we live in, there's not much time to waste. If you're going to make something, if you're going to try to follow a dream, now's the time to do it. Don't hesitate. Don't get caught up in the phony drama of life and let that stop you from following your dreams. And that was the message that they conveyed. And Ed Piskor's enthusiasm and passion for comics was really unparalleled. I don't know too many people who would get really, really amped up looking at comics, you know. Like, he would geek out. And that's an awesome thing, because you know that he loved his craft, and you know that he loved what he did. And I wasn't even like a huge fan of his comics. It was his message that I was a fan of, and his work ethic, and his generosity in sharing his collected wisdom in what he knew in how to make comics and how to navigate the business side of this industry. And paired with Jimmy Rugg and Tom Scholey on that channel, they created a space where their passion was infectious, and I think it inspired a lot of people to make comics, and it inspired me. And I found that channel, and I found these three individuals, as I said, during the pandemic, at a time when I really needed something to hold on to. And, you know, they introduced me to a much wider world and a medium that I thought I already knew a lot about, even though I had been out of comics for a couple of decades or more. I was, you know, lightly dabbling in it here and there, but not really aware of what was going on sort of in the contemporary comic scene, especially in the indie scene, which is where I think, you know, most quality comics today are being made. As I've spoken about, you know, corporate comics from Marvel and DC and some of the other publishers are just mostly, you know, not interesting. I'm not going to address the cancel culture situation. Maybe at some point in the future, but I wanted to keep this positive and make it more about the impact that Ed had on me through the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, and what I think his legacy will be. And I think his legacy will be all of the aforementioned. He'll be remembered for his art, for his stories, for his incredible bridges that he built to Japan to introduce Americans to more manga. A lot of that having to do with Sean, Japan Book Hunter, who was one of his friends who sells manga online. and the folks that he went there with, like Brian Moss and Jeff Darrow. I think Jim Ruggs got to go out to Jim Ruggs got to do his own manga quest now, because Ed had always been trying to get him out there, and Jim's a family guy. He's got other obligations, I'm sure. But I would love to see the yearly manga quest continue. I think it's what Ed would want. So my personal feeling is that this tragedy has, I think it's going to ignite a lot of people even more so to take a lot of positive action. I think there's a lot of silver linings that are going to come out of this tragedy. And I think if each one of us continues to have a love and a passion for the medium, whether you're a creator or just a reader and a collector, either way is totally fine. But for my part, I'm going to continue to keep in mind the things that Ed talked about in terms of how to apply yourself to being a better artist and to pushing forward with your goals and objectives that are a part of your dream. One of the things I'll never forget, I think it was Jim who said this, if you make just one panel a day, you're doing it. If you make one panel a day, and let's say there's on average maybe 6 panels on a page, and the average comic is something like 20 to 23 pages long, you're looking at like just about 3 books a year that you're creating. And that really stuck with me. And I'm not drawing comics. I'm a visual artist. I paint canvases, but I do draw comics a little bit, but they're not for publication. I just do it because I feel compelled to do it. But at some point I want to write a comic. I do have a comic book that I've storyboarded out, and that'll be a future episode. But I'm not a good enough of an artist to, say that I'm a comic book artist. I'm probably a better writer than I am a comic book artist right now. However, that was part of Jim and Ed's message, was it doesn't matter what your skill level is. It doesn't matter. Never say to yourself, oh, I don't have the skill level, I'm not good enough, or nobody likes what I do. I got news for you. Most people aren't going to like what you do. They don't like what you're doing now. That's not why you do it. That was part of their message. You don't create art for other people to give their approval. You create art because you want to, because you need to, because you have a story to tell or a vision that needs to be realized. And that was a beautiful message, and it was very inspiring. And it's a message that's been around a long time from other people, but these guys were giving you that message every day, reinforcing that message. And even if they weren't so much on the message, but they were just looking at a comic book and going through it, that just the passion and the intensity that they had was part of that message. It gets you excited about the medium. It gets you excited about, I want to make something like that. Oh, I need to go out and get that comic book. And physically look through it and, and study it and use it as a reference point for my own artwork. And that's an amazing gift to the world that will never be forgotten by the people that knew Ed Piskor. And that's all I have to say. Stay geek.